Do I believe what the Bible says? Or, do I think that I need to reinvent it? Because that's what a lot of entrepreneurs do who say they're Christian. They try to reinvent it. The Bible says devote all of your attention, all of your heart, all of your mind, all of your soul on Jesus, and the rest will just happen.
But that's a hard thought to wrestle with when you can barely pay rent next month.
I'm so thankful that.
How do you make sure that one does not outbalance the other or take over your life more than others? Because you care about business, you care about real estate, you care about faith, you care about family. Do you believe in balance, or do you feel like there's some things that at certain seasons in your life have to take precedence over the other? Have you wrestled with this kind of thought?
This is a really deep question, especially for the first one, because I guess trying to explain my thought philosophy is going to be somewhat hard, and I'll have to explain through kind of some stories. But long story short, I believe you can have balance, but I also don't think you should have balance. And the reason is, I wrote a book called The Wealthy Way, and it's kind of about that, time management and balance for all the areas of your life, right? At the end of the day, if you're working all the time and you're making great money, but you're losing your health and you have a heart attack, or you get divorced, or you have no faith and you're spiritually dead, well, dude, it doesn't even matter. Why'd you even spend all this time working? It's just, it literally will mean nothing, right? No amount of money is going to save you from your health if you're at the end of your day. And I've had many guys who have really worked and ruined their families, and they neglected their family throughout the whole time of building. And it's dude, that ain't it. Would you go back in time and do it differently? And they're like, yeah, it wasn't worth it. So on that end, I think that yes, you should have balance in all these different areas. The question becomes, well, man, how do you prioritize which one in what season? Because that's what we were talking about before of well, when you're in build season, you kind of put off some other things while you're in build season. And that's the part that I say, no, that part I disagree with. And to actually just make my philosophy really simple, you mentioned faith is a big part of what I do. And, you saw us having a meeting. We were actually having a meeting about everything we're going to do on the faith side of things, next year in 2025 with all of our events for a nonprofit. And, there's a Bible verse. It's Matthew 6:33. Seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, and all of these things will be added to you as well. So my belief is actually anti-balance in that if I only focus on the kingdom, if I just focus on pursuing Jesus, the rest will all be added to me. That's what the Bible promises. So I got to really ask myself, do I believe what the Bible says? Or, do I think that I need to reinvent it? Because that's what a lot of entrepreneurs do who say they're Christian. They try to reinvent it. They say, well, I got this thing over here that I'm doing, and maybe I'll make some time for God. That is literally the opposite of what the Bible says. The Bible says devote all of your attention, all of your heart, all of your mind, all of your soul on Jesus, and the rest will just happen. I don't need to plan it out.
But that's a hard thought to wrestle with when you can barely pay rent next month. So you have to understand that when I want to pull this wisdom because I think it's beautiful, but I also want to understand how this applies to somebody who's in the early stages of building. Because also when you first start out, it's very difficult for you to think of anything outside of even money. Forget it, even God, Jesus, it doesn't matter what you believe. At the beginning, you believe that you just want to make a lot of money, and you realize that money doesn't mean that much anymore. And then you want freedom. And then you eventually want to not even have to worry about money or even slightly working. You just want to have complete freedom to choose whatever you want to do. And I think that's what most people optimize for when they start. And then they go on this journey, and then they start to evolve. And then they get to where you are, where now you can say, I can focus on Jesus, and all the other things will come after I focus on God and Jesus. But when you're starting, it's very difficult to put that principle into practice because you just want to optimize on work, and you want to optimize on hustle, and you want to optimize on closing your next client. So what's the lesson for somebody early stage and starting that is that's a great idea in theory, but ultimately I have to make my business work.
Yeah.
That's where I want to put my energy towards.
Well, let me say this. People have asked me, dude, what about in the early stages where you work in 80-hour weeks? What were you doing? What was life like? Well, I can tell you my early stages were way harder than I would guess 99.9% of people's. So, I was 21 years old when I started, let's say, my adult business career, had no money. I was a minor league baseball player making $1,200 a month. That was only half the year too. So I made literally $7,000 a year. That was my income. And, I was a Christian then. I grew up in church. I understood like God always comes first, not my career. And, my career wasn't an entrepreneur at that time. It was as a baseball player, right? And I had no idea how I was going to pay for bills because also in 2010, we just came out of the Great Recession. There were no jobs. My parents lost everything. I couldn't depend on my parents. They lost the home I grew up in. Literally, I had no support or income other than $7,000 a year. And that wasn't even guaranteed because guess what? I could get cut tomorrow, right? Like, it's not my business. If I'm not good enough, they can get rid of me. So I had to depend on God for everything because I had nothing. And it's like, all right, well, how am I going to make money, Lord? Like, what do you want me to do? So that's the first thing that I always do is like, I ask in prayer, what should I do next? And that's every step of the way, whether I was broke, whether it's today and I'm still like, well, okay, look at all these different opportunities. How do I discern what's the best opportunity, right? But long story short, in those early stages, man, I lived on, I became a realtor in 2010 as well. Sucked, made like no money doing it. I was a substitute teacher making $100 a day because that was the only thing I could figure out that like could actually make me money. And I did that. I probably lived off, call it 20 grand a year for about, 3 years. And I ended up getting married during that time too. So this is another myth.
So I have no excuse.
I mean, look, you came here to hear the truth, but that's one of the things that drives me crazy is when guys wait, especially in they're single, they're building their careers. And I'm like, guys, you can never say that you have to do it because I'm telling you what I did. And I was in a way worse position than anybody that I've ever met today in terms of how much I was making and the things I did. Because I still pursued playing baseball for 8 seasons, making $7,000 a year. 8 years from 21 to 27, I was married, I was making that money, and I had to figure out side hustles and things just to survive to continue the dream. And that's what I did. I started flipping couches, which was a revelation from God. I didn't learn that on YouTube. There was no TikTok. It was just this idea that he planted in my head. I'm like, oh, I could probably flip couches and make money. And then, I remember I was praying on our 1-year anniversary. This was in 2014. I was like, all right, flipping couches has made me like good money, but I'm not going to do this the rest of my life. What should I do? And then I hear real estate. And I'm like, real estate? I already failed at real estate. What do you mean real estate? And then sure enough, it was flipping houses. It was different than being a realtor. And so I maxed out all of our credit cards for 50 grand, flipped our first house and, I made $25,000. It was crazy. But that then led to the next stage, and of flipping, making a bunch of money. And then COVID hits and I'm about to lose it all because I had 50 house flips going on. And, they're talking about everything crashing during COVID. They're like, oh, well, the economy's going to burn all this stuff. And I'm like, dang, I got like $20 million worth of property right now. And it could all go to zero and I could lose everything I've ever built. I was like, what do you want me to do, God? And I'm like, all of a sudden I hear YouTube. I'm like, now ain't the time to be making YouTube videos. Like I got way bigger problems than making YouTubes and TikToks. But that was what I heard. And then sure enough, that leads to, all these other things. And then, my point is every step of the way, I've been seeking God first and he's always provided, even with nothing. And, so I just want to make sure people understand that this is not something to pursue later.
I don't think a lot of people think that way, though. I don't think a lot of...
No one thinks that way.
I don't think a lot of... I like, as you're saying, I'm being like super pragmatic. I don't think many entrepreneurs seek inspiration in God before they build a business.
And why do 99% of entrepreneurs fail? Because they do what everyone else does.
So when you say to somebody, and this is a very interesting topic because I've actually spoken to a lot of rabbis, preachers about godlessness in society and its implications, but it's never been from the lens of God and business together and helping that creative process to build something new.
Yeah.
So when you sort of ignore what everyone else does and you're not looking for product market fit in a traditional way.
Yeah.
You're not going on Reddit and solving problems that people have. And
all that's a huge TAM.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. That's what everyone does. So what you have this belief system, you have this faith system, you have this idea that comes to you. What's your process for making it work?
Yeah, great question. So to talk about the first part you said of like everybody's doing it the same way. Like I said, why would you be surprised when everyone has the same results? Most entrepreneurs fail. They have to go get another job. 90+% of people are living paycheck to paycheck. So currently the way that you're told doesn't work. That's clear, right? There are outliers, and those outliers force it to work by just doing it to the extreme.
Yeah.
Right. I'm like, that ain't for me, like that. And that's literally not what the Bible teaches. Right. And here's the other part, like on the other hand of it too, the Bible doesn't teach anything about all the other myths we're told, like, hey, we should, have this number for retirement. We should, know our financial freedom number so we can just chill and do whatever. Right. Like every single person in the Bible worked at something until the day they died. Work never stopped. The first thing God did was give Adam a job. He said, you're going to go work, go tend to the fields. So I love work. You'll never hear me talk about retirement because I'm just like, dude, what are we working on next? I think you're the same too, right? Like we love to work, and it's hard for entrepreneurs who love to work to not work, right? We're not like lazy society where they don't want to work. Like we're like, myself included, I'm like, I could work 80 hours a week.
1,000%. And I enjoy it.
Yeah. And enjoy it. Right. But I also understand that God gave me these parameters of how I'm supposed to live my life, not because he's like, bro, I don't want you to have any fun or anything else. It's like, because this is what's going to help you live the best life and live the way I designed it for you, right? You have parameters in your business, but that's why we have KPIs. That's why we have core values. That's why we have SOPs. It's because this is how you should do it the right way. The Bible's just an SOP for life. And so, for me, when I look at a new opportunity, once again, I go through my SOP and I do what it says, right? And so for me, first thing is prayer. Hey, God, what do you think about this opportunity, man? I got this guy, Scott, here, and he's thinking about doing this business with me, right? And I'll see if I hear anything, right? The next thing would be leaning on wise counsel. I mean, we call this mentors in the normal world, but, for me, I don't want just normal mentors, but I want Christian mentors too, because they see the world obviously very different than normal people, right? And so they'll catch things that don't necessarily make sense from a worldly perspective, right? I mean, somebody could look at it and say, dude, that opportunity with Scott is like amazing. You guys are going to be able to do this. The product market fit's great. You guys already have all the customers, the upsells, the asset. Like, dude, everything on paper looks great. And then somebody else can look at it and say, hey, honestly, dude, like it sounds great, but I just don't feel right about it in my spirit. And there's nothing else that can be said at that point, right? Because it's just like at the end of the day, there are things that make perfect sense that if you go down that path, and I've done it before where I've rejected my gut, aka the spirit, and I'm like, bro, this is the best opportunity ever. And it's led me to the biggest lawsuits, the biggest headaches, the biggest problems. And it's like, then there's things that I avoided so much trouble. And I just knew, I was like, I don't know what it is about that, but I'm not doing that. And then it comes out, a year later.
As you're saying this, I'm thinking through some ideas that I actually think you pull this wisdom out of the Bible. I think they're very applicable to people that are not religious, because what I speak about quite often is when you're starting something, you have to build your life and architect your life in a way that you can continue to do that thing and improve and iterate and learn and sometimes pivot or whatever it is. But you have to be able to do that thing for an extended period of time to show that it
avoid burnout.
Exactly. And that means structuring your finances, structuring the hours that you can commit to that thing so that you're not ruining your relationship with your wife or your husband and your kids and all of this different stuff, right? So what I think that you are saying through your interpretation of the Bible is setting up this framework so that you can actually be successful in business because you're approaching it through the right lens.
100%.
You're approaching it with the relationship with your family, with your kids intact. You're not like over-indexing on business because, again, through wisdom taught down by a book that is, thousands of years old.
Yep.
You are understanding that all these other components are important in your life. And when you structure a business in a way that respects all the other things that are important in your life, that's a business that's going to be there in 10 or 20 years. That's the business that you continue to build because you're not destroying everything else around it.
100%, right? And I think that from just a practical standpoint, right, it comes back to, what are my priorities and core values?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people you would talk to would say, well, yeah, family's a priority to me. And I'd say, okay, let me see your schedule. Just show me your calendar. Let's just literally, this would be the most
Very
practical thing. Let's just count the hours you spend with your family. Let's count the hours you spend, on your health. Let's count the hours you spend with God. And let's count the hours you spend in business, right? And let's not even count the hours you waste in business, because we know that a lot of 80-hour guys, they could be 40-hour guys if they were just more efficient. And so, for me, that's what the wealthy way is all about. It's taking the things that you say are a priority in your life and making those things first, and then building business around that. So, for example, like I was saying, I built all of this like with the same framework, right? Like I didn't have money. My time was extremely limited because I had to play baseball, leave 6 months out of the year while simultaneously building a business and having, a new wife and, all these things. And what I realized was, when I made the main things, everything else fell into place, just like the Bible verse said, So like, to give practical knowledge to those listening, for the last, let's call it 10 years, I've been flipping houses for 10 years. My schedule really hasn't changed. I don't work on the weekends. I didn't when I flipped my first house. I still don't today. Okay. So it's not something that I didn't earn. It was in the plan from the beginning. So I don't work on weekends. I don't work past 5 o'clock. So every day this office closes at 5. Most of my employees leave. Some might finish up some stuff, but we all leave because I want my employees to have the same mindset I do. Like, I don't want them to get burnt out. I don't want them to lose their families. I don't want any of those things. Like, I genuinely care about them. And so, in order for that to happen though, we got to get super efficient while we are here. They know that. I do not have any tolerance for wasting time. If I see people wandering around, not doing anything, like, what are you doing? Go sit in your office and make some calls. Go get some sales. Like, there's something for you to do. Like, there's a price for this lifestyle that we get to have with work-life balance. Yeah, you only got to be here from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, but guess what? You better be working extremely efficient, 9 to 5. Like I even told him today, I go, look, this week we got Thanksgiving and we don't have to come on Friday. We have 3 days to work. All right. You got to get 5 days of work in the next 3 days. Y'all don't need hour lunches. You don't need any of this stuff. Get what you need to get done this week. I'm not asking them to go work till 7 or 8 tonight. I'm just like, get what needs to get done. Hold yourself accountable. And so, we do that. And then even for me on my faith, from the beginning, every morning, I read my Bible, I pray, I meditate, I memorize scripture. I didn't learn all this about scripture because, I just watched a YouTube video. I've been doing it for 10 years in a row every morning for an hour every day. And it starts to become more and more clear of what's true and what's not. And then you also have 10 years of hindsight to say, well, I took a path. They took a path. I'm pretty happy where my path is.
Yeah.
And, we have Bible study on Wednesday mornings. We go to church on Sunday. So it's like, it's important to me to do those things. And it's also important for me to get home at 5 to have dinner with my family. It's also important for me every morning to work out. That's why I'm still in shape, even after I'm done playing. And I'm just efficient, man. It's like, dude, we're going to go film a pod. We're going to film a pod here. I got a couple more meetings I got to do Monday. And then guess what? Friday, I'm golfing. I'm hanging, like, everything is like, yo.
So why do you've built this super efficient machine, which I respect. I love it. I think that's the way business should be. I don't generally see super efficient machines, well, really ever, but I mean, but if you look at the companies where people actually go home at 5, they're enormous companies.
Yeah.
There are companies that are well over $100 million in revenue.
Yeah.
If you are like a sub $10 million company, that founder, owner, CEO is expecting people to work nonstop, 24/7. I don't like the environment of most sub $10 million companies. Obviously, this is not a hard and fast rule, but I mean, it's tough to build a business.
Yeah.
And owner-operated companies, they try and extract as much out of people as possible, and they expect their team to care as much about their company as they do, which
why should they?
They never will.
They don't own it.
So exactly. So why do you think, so now we have the theory. You talk about efficiency and you talk about balance, you talk about things that are important. So you go into building a business knowing all the things that are important to you. That's great. But why were you able to be successful when so many other companies don't operate the way that you operate, that don't operate with those limits on time and time in office and focus on office?
Well, I think it's a few things, right? I mean, obviously, when you're talking about spiritual, supernatural things, there are things that just happen that other people just don't get to have the benefit of. Like, I can't say that every door that's been opened in my life has been a direct result of how hard we worked to how much we earned it, but has just simply been a gift. Like, I can't even explain how I know so many big people, like almost everybody in the business space who you see on social media. And it's not because I'm anywhere close to their level. I don't have $100 million company, yet I can text them all. They all come here. They all respect me. They come like to meet in my office and we film. It's like a lot of that is just favor, and it just is what it is. And so I think God gives favor to those who are obedient. Like, that's a promise in the Bible as well. It's not just like, oh, well, Ryan, we'll give him this. And, like, no, there's this level of stewardship. The Bible promises that if I trust you with a little, I can trust you with much. And so if I was good enough to be able to still be obedient and follow him when I was making $1,200 a month, how much more could I do if we're making 1.2 million, 1,000 times it, right? So that's one level, right? And a lot of people won't understand that. So, what are some other tactical things? Well, I think that number one, longevity comes from the things you were actually talking about of, dude, like, let's just budget this out. Like, what's actually sustainable, right? How much capacity do I have to work? Like, how many hours am I willing to do this? Like, at a sustainable level, it's not going to ruin my life. We can keep at this. Number two, how much financially can we devote to this, right? I mean, I don't come from the startup world where, people raise millions of dollars to just burn it and lose money. I have never lost money.
That's not a good strategy.
I've never raised money to start any business. I've bootstrapped everything. So it's like, yo, we better be making money from day one. That's how I operate. So I think budgeting time and money and resource is so important to this. And honestly, the third one is, and you hear this all the time, it's just like, at that point, if you're doing everything right, it's just now compounding time. Like, just do it over and over again. It's going to be boring. Just keep doing it. Keep making the videos, keep calling the sellers, keep talking to the clients, keep throwing the events. You do it enough times, you look up 5 years later, 10 years later, and you're like, wow, look how far ahead we are than everyone. Look how many people dropped off. Like, look how many people were like a flash in the pan. Like, they started out way ahead of us. And then, they went bankrupt, they fell off, this thing happened, or they burned out. Yep. Like, you see that all the time.
One of my favorite quotes you've said is, your why has to be bigger than your fear. So I have to ask you, is God your why, or is there a bigger why than even that?
No. Yeah. It's just simply leading people to Jesus. I mean, at the end of the day.
Actually, I want to add something onto that too.
Okay.
How do you balance? So say that's a great why.
Yep.
But how do you balance that why versus providing for your family as a why versus achieving the highest version of yourself and the most quote unquote successful version of yourself?
All right. So this is once again going to be kind of controversial, but I actually do not believe that it's biblical to even have like your own goals. So, when you talk about the Bible, right, one of the things that it says is you need to die to yourself. You become a slave to Christ. Like, your old self dies the moment you become a Christian. What does that mean? Well, it's like your old self dies. There's only the new self. Like, when people say, man, I'm trying to follow, God's will, but I have my own will and my own dreams and my own ambitions. How do I fit God's will with my will? The reality is there should be no your will anymore. There should only be God's will. And if you're following what God wants you to do, that's all that matters. And you're going to trust that he's going to provide. It goes back to, how do I balance my family? If I truly believe God's promise, Matthew 6:25 through 26 talks about how, look at the birds in the air, right? The birds in the air, they don't sow or reap or work or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them and takes care of them. They don't have to worry about how they're going to eat the next day. They just do. And yet we're always worried about when our next paycheck's going to come, what's our next job, because we don't believe that he's going to take care of us, right? Now, if you're not a Christian, I get it. You do need to depend on yourself to do all these things. But if you're a Christian and you truly believe the Bible, this should not be a concern. So, once again, we're talking about...
The counter argument would be there's lots of poor Christians. There's lots of people that are struggling.
There's poor Christians, but they're still taken care of, right? Once again, we're not talking about levels of wealth and millions of dollars. We're talking about he's just going to take care of you. And this is where it really comes down to in the end, right? There's lots of poor people in the Bible. There's lots of rich people in the Bible. And you mentioned this too, like, what's the main goal with all this? The main goal is to help people start thinking about eternity, because we spend so much time thinking about, my 1 year, business plan, my 5-year business plan. How are we going to exit this company in the next 10 years, right? We spend hours with boardrooms, team, all this stuff, figuring out that. People spend almost no time thinking about eternity. And the crazy part is, if you just think, we're all logical, practical people on this show, we're going to be dead way longer than we're alive. Okay?
Yeah.
So if we're thinking about retirement and where we're going to actually be for a long time, eternity should actually be the thing we're thinking about most and planning for that. I actually heard a quote the other day. It said that, imagine this, the next 24 hours of your life, somebody came to you and said, hey, Scott, the next 24 hours of your life is going to dictate the next 1,000 years, So make sure these next 24 hours, you really...
That's a scary thought, dude.
You really do it. The crazy part about that is that's not even close to what the actual truth is, because that's a finite number. Eternity is infinite. So even if we get 100 years here on Earth, it's still not a 24-hour to 1,000-year ratio. It's infinite.
It's infinite, yeah.
And yet we never think about it. And the truth of the matter is there's so many different belief systems, right? Like, I understand that, right? Maybe, you're like, man, maybe I should be Hindu. Maybe I should be Mormon. Maybe I should be Christian. Maybe I should be this. It's like, well, almost all of them say there's like one way.
Yeah.
You better do your research to know which one's true, because if there's a slight chance that one of them's true, you've been focusing on the wrong thing.
Oh, it's funny because, yeah, there is a through line between all religions anyways. It doesn't matter what you actually believe. The difference, I think, the biggest difference is between people that have zero belief versus people that have even a little bit of belief. That is the biggest difference, because if you believe nothing, I don't even know how you go through life believing that this is it. Like, this is all it is. Actually, that's a more stressful thought, that
knowing that this is the end.
This is the end. That's a very stressful thought.
Yeah.
I don't think I want to ever sit with that thought, to be quite honest. I want to have, forget about the fact that it's good to have some moral compass and some definition of good and something larger than yourself, so that you don't think that your ego is the most important thing on this planet. I think that those are all good things, but outside of that, it's a very scary thought to think that when you die, that's it. That's horrifying.
It's depressing.
I'm curious about your opinion on this, because I've thought about this a lot. I do see a rise in secularism in society, a lack of God in society. Obviously, I'm sure you think about it quite often. There's godlessness in society.
I live in Vegas.
Yeah. I live in Miami.
Yeah. We know all about it.
What do you think the true implications are? Because I'm sure you're closer to this phenomenon than me, because you work with people that are trying to find God. And usually there's an impetus. There's a reason why they're seeking.
Yeah, people usually have to reach a low point for them to finally seek, right? Because they could have had everything and lost it all or whatever. And they're like, dude, okay, it wasn't worth it. Or they reach the end of their life, man. They do the plan that they thought was the plan for 30 years. And then they're like, dude, I'm still not fulfilled. It wasn't what I thought it was. And so then they go to seeking. But yeah, the impetus for godlessness is that there's a lot of people going to hell, and that's the truth. And that's the sad, scary part about it. And people need to hear it, because I'm talking about eternity, right? Once again, most people, even if they're not Christian, believe there's a heaven and a hell.
I wasn't even talking after you die. I was talking while you're still on this planet.
Yeah. Dude, you live in godlessness. Once again, it's not like God gave us those rules like, hey, don't do these things because I want to prevent you from having fun. That's not like most people who are practicing all this crazy stuff think. They're like, dude, that doesn't sound like fun. And it's like, bro, you can only sleep with so many women, and you start to realize it. You can only get smashed so many times before you realize it. You can only make so much money and then realize, man, I've made it all, and I still feel the same. Everybody who goes that path comes to that conclusion at some point. And then you have a choice. You either make a change or you keep numbing the pain.
When I look at people that have had massive success, people that are now billionaires or over $100 million in exit value and whatever, and they're always seeking something after that.
They're never satisfied.
You can never be fully satisfied, because again, I love that. There's only so many women you can sleep with. There's only so many things you can buy. And ultimately, that's not why we're put on this earth anyways. It doesn't matter what you believe. Those are not fulfilling things.
Yeah. Whenever I meet a person, because I'm around a lot of rich people who do different things. Whenever I meet a rich person who really values their stuff, I kind of feel bad for them. And I don't mean it in a way because like I like having nice stuff too. You know, I have a nice house and nice cars, but like I don't go in, like I'll just to give a prime example, I meet guys who have these massive car collections. And I'm not saying it's a sin to have a massive car collection by any means, but it's where your heart is at. And I can see there are guys who just keep buying car after car after car, because it's like, it's the thing that gets them, makes them happy. And like, they feel really good. And then they buy the car and then, it wears off after 2 days.
Yeah.
And they're immediately looking for the next car. And I'm just like, and then, they love to show it like, dude, yeah, look at this car and this car and this car. And I'm like, that's cool, man. I can tell you really like your cars. Like, yeah, I don't really care, If you want to lend me one, I'll drive it. I'll drive it. I think it's great. But like, I clearly don't like love them the way you do.
When you talk about the wealthy way,
yeah,
what is your definition of the wealthy way? What is your version of wealth?
The subtitle of the book is Don't Go Broke Trying to Get Rich. A lot of people go broke on every aspect of their life trying to get rich, making money. And I think that's a good, kind of hook. My ghostwriter thought of that. I was like, that's a good line. But yeah, I think it's just having, for me, wealth is not just money, right? It's all the areas we've been talking about because you truly need them all, right? Like, I meet tons of, even broke Christians, right? People who don't have a lot of money that are Christians that are still living a suboptimal life. Yeah, they're saved, but man, like they just can't figure out how to get out of the paycheck to paycheck life. And I know they can get out of it. They just need to learn skills, right? And so money is, I don't want anyone to think I think money is like not important. The Bible actually talks about money than any other subject.
Why is there that negative connotation? Like, I don't understand that, but there was always this, I don't know if it's true or not, but I always felt that with very religious people, there was this almost negative connotation about money.
Yeah.
And I never got it. I never really understood where that came from.
It comes from ignorance. So the Bible does not talk negatively about like rich people. It's not that rich people are bad or anything like that.
Oh, it's that camel quote.
Yeah. But it's easier for the camel to go through the eye of the needle than it is for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven. And it's true, right? That's kind of a little bit different in that. And this is why my mission has really been to help entrepreneurs. And that's why I love talking about it on shows like this, who a lot of people don't know me, but like, it's hard to get a rich person to, give themselves to Christ because they think they got it all, right? Like everybody's like, bro, you're killing it. What you're doing's awesome. Like you have all the things you could ever want. And so they don't even realize how much of a problem they have. So that's why that quote exists. But, in terms of why do we have this poverty mindset in Christianity? There's definitely like a set of Christians that have that mindset. And I think there's lots of reasons for it. So I can't name all of them. A couple of them are that, misinterpreting Bible verses, right? Like 2 Corinthians 9:6-7 says like, or no, that's talking about giving, but there's a Bible verse that talks about how, you can't worship both God and money. You can only be a slave to one. And the truth is, if you go back to what I said, where it's like, okay, if I worship God and I just trust God for everything, money will come as a byproduct. Now, how much money, I don't know, but I know I'm going to be taken care of it. You might end up a guy like me. You might end up, middle class. You might end up whatever, right? But odds are, you're going to be okay. And then there's what you would have prosperity, minded Christians who think every Christian should be rich. Like, God bless. They believe that God blesses those, who are true believers. And if you're not a true believer, that's why you're broke. Like that's their mindset. And that's also wrong. The truth is God has given us all different skills and talents and abilities. And so, we're called to just play our role.
One of my favorite ideas, this is not my idea. I can't remember who had originally said this, but if you do not have God in your life, something else will replace God for you.
Yeah.
And it'll be a vice.
We'll call those idols.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think that's healthy either. I think that's incredibly
Well,
toxic.
and I'll say this too, and I'll say, like, I'm acting like I'm the most wholesome guy ever. I am not, okay? So, I've had many failures in my life, man. I've been sued. I've had people lose money. I've done everything you can imagine, man. I don't
Well, by the
deserve.
way, that is a right of business. I mean, if you build a big enough business, all this shit happens.
Yeah,
Regardless.
yeah, you're not gonna, bat 1,000, right? But with that, I've just kind of realized that, you know, I'm so thankful that I don't have to like live in that guilt. And I'm also thankful that my career is not my identity because, there are times where, man, in business, I be killing it, man. And it's like, everybody's like, bro, how much did you guys do? You guys did so many deals. Look at how many views you're getting. Let's interview you about this thing, right? And then all of a sudden next year, boom, doubles interest rates, recession. I was like, dude, I'm losing money. What's going on here, right? And throughout it all, it's like, I just don't let my business career, become my idol because that's what a lot of people do. And I struggled with that early on, and God kind of brought me through it with my baseball career because I was that way in baseball. Every day, in baseball, baseball's a lot different than in business because in baseball, you play every day and your stats are public. Imagine if your bank account and your P&L was public in every business every day. It got updated. They're like, oh, Ryan, dang, Ryan, they didn't make any money. You actually lost money on a deal and everyone could see it. That's how sports is. It's all transparent. And, that was hard for me as a 21-year-old, trying to deal with. And then you get released, you get fired, and you got to deal with that.
And it's all very public.
It's all public. Everyone knows. And I did that for 8 seasons, man, battling identity. And it wasn't until the end when I really started to understand, like, man, this doesn't matter. Like, at the end of the day, I can't have my happiness and my peace be defined if I had a good game yesterday or if I had a good week.
That was a good lesson for business too.
Yeah. And that's why when I came into business later, I had kind of learned all those lessons in my 20s. And I'm like, bro, I don't care if we have a bad week. I don't care if somebody's talking crap online.
Yeah.
Like, this is nothing.
Was there an experience that sort of reshaped your definition of wealth from pure finance to like more of a holistic definition of wealth?
Yeah, it was actually the birth of my son. So, my son was born in January of 2019. He was born prematurely. So he's 2 months premature. And, I didn't it was crazy. She was having contractions. We didn't know, it was our first child. We didn't know what was going on. They're like, hey, the baby's coming like right now. And I'm like, dude, he's supposed to come in like 2 months. What do you mean right now?
That's so stressful.
And they're like, well, he's coming right now. And I'm like, is he going to make it? Like, this is pretty early. And they're like, well, we can't say, but, just we're getting prepared. So, I'm praying. Once again, seek God in every situation. And he's born. They say he's going to have a lot of complications and issues. He ends up having to stay in the NICU for 2 months. So every day for 2 months, I had to go, to the hospital in the morning to go see him with my wife at night. And it was a super stressful time, especially for my wife. She's a brand new mom and she can't even be with her baby. And he can't breathe, he can't eat, he can't do anything. Like, he's got all these problems. Finally we get to take him home. And dude, we're scared because he can't breathe. Like, I'm like, what if he stops breathing while he's at home?
Yeah.
It's just stressful. And, throughout that time too, there's a very high chance he's going to have special needs. You're going to have to start getting him in therapies and all these things every week. And so, my wife's learning how to navigate that process of everything. And, that first year was so extremely stressful and hard because it was just all new and all unknown. And also too, during that year was like one of the times in business where like we really had to do a big pivot and like it was very stressful as well. And so I made the choice that year because my wife was really struggling with it. And I said, you know what? I was already on the schedule of, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Like, so, for a lot of guys, it might be like, well, dude, I'm home a lot, but I could tell that she needed more. And so I said, you know what? I'm just not going to go to work on Wednesdays either. I'm going to spend Wednesdays with just her, and try to give her a break, kind of like be there for her right now in this really hard time. And I did that, for most of the year. And that really like was what she needed at that time. And at the end of the year, this was about a week before Christmas, he fell and hit his head, and he had this